Let me ask you something. If the rule you followed brought you to this, of what use was the rule?
No Country for Old Men is my favorite movie of all time. Not only that, but if there was one project that I would have to say is the reason I began to feel the need to tell stories, it would be this movie. To put that in perspective for you, whenever I started this YouTube channel, I started it because there were 5 videos I really wanted to make. The first of which was the Black Parade video, which link in the description. And the second was this. And as for the other 3, you're just gonna have to wait for those. Sorry. In my opinion, this movie achieves what cinema should strive to be. The ability to tell a thematic storyline hidden beneath an already well-structured narrative storyline is something rarely seen and even more rarely appreciated. So we're going to run through this story. I'm going to give a very brief explanation of what happens in the plot, but this is your only warning. I'm going to spoil the whole thing, and if you have not seen this movie, and if you do not get anything else out of this video, please watch No Country for Old Men. 2 things I want to get out of the way really quick. The first of which being I have an editor now, and while I don't believe they'll be editing this video, they will be editing upcoming projects. So I'm going to leave all of her information in the description below if you want to check her out or follow her or whatever. She'll probably be doing the next video, so if you want to go ahead and show some support, like I said, in the description. The other one being, I passed 100,000, which is a milestone I thought I would never see in any regard. And to see it happen this fast, and to just see like how fast this community's grown, and the fact that I can make videos like this now that I care about. I have a whole video coming out to say thank you, but I want to say here right now, thank you. It really does mean the most. I'm overwhelmed, and it's all thanks to you all. So sincerely, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for watching. Our movie opens with a narration over Western scenery of how good the world was in times gone by. I'm going to cover all the meaning and symbolism after I give the brief recap, so for now we're just going through the basic plots in case it's been a while since you've seen the movie. We're first introduced to our lead villain Anton and watch as he kills a sheriff's deputy and then a driver in order to steal his car. We then meet our protagonist of the story, Llewelyn, who while he is hunting comes across the aftermath of a cartel shootout. While there, he finds a briefcase containing $2 million. However, while he was at the scene of the event, he came across a man who was dying and requested water. Llewelyn, feeling guilty over the situation, returns that night to give the man water, and is almost killed by the cartel in the process. We then see our villain again, Anton, enter a gas station and threaten the man behind the counter with the result of a coin flip. Llewelyn, realizing the danger that he's in, urges his wife to leave town. We then come to Anton, who is now tracking down Llewelyn for stealing the money, and the first scene of the character Sheriff Bell, who begins tracking down our killer Anton. This becomes sort of the core struggle throughout the movie. Llewelyn is trying to get away from Anton, and the sheriff is trying to catch up to whatever Anton is doing. Llewelyn then hides in a motel, which Anton chases him to, and barely misses Llewelyn as he makes his escape. We are then introduced to a federal agent named Carson Wells, who is tasked with tracking down Anton. We then see Anton track Llewelyn down to a second hotel, in which it seems that the two tie, each suffering serious injuries from the altercation. Llewelyn escapes across the south border into Mexico, in which he meets Carson. Carson explains the nature of Anton and how Llewelyn's struggle to fight him is pretty much pointless. The sheriff, in the meantime, goes to see Llewelyn's wife to try to convince her to tell him where Llewelyn is at. Anton then finds Carson, the agent who was sent to kill him, before killing Carson and then threatening Llewelyn that if he does not turn himself over to Anton, Anton's going to kill his wife. Not only that, but he promises to kill Llewelyn's wife if Llewelyn does not give up. We then see Llewelyn's wife and mother are followed by members of the cartel, and in a brief scene a lot of people miss, Carla's mom tells the cartel members where Llewelyn is supposed to be. And then in the next scene, very abruptly, Llewelyn is killed by members of the cartel as the sheriff arrives moments after. This seems rather sudden and anticlimactic, but like I mentioned, we'll get to that. The sheriff, after telling Llewelyn's wife, gathers himself and tries to make sense of the situation. He returns to the hotel where Llewelyn was killed and finds nothing. He then goes to see his old friend Ellis, who informs us that the sheriff has retired. Anton then, keeping the promise that he made to Llewelyn, goes to Llewelyn's wife to kill her. After leaving her house, Anton is struck by a car, and we then get the final scene of the movie, which is the sheriff explaining to his wife the dreams he had of his father. So that's our basic rundown. But what does all of this mean? If you've already seen this movie, I don't have to tell you how well the plot and tension of some scenes work in the grand scheme of things. On the surface, we get this very intense thriller of what seems to be a psychopath chasing down our standard good guy or cowboy of the story. However, unlike most of those stories where our good guy gets the girl, gets the money, and winds up on top, he's killed in what is seemingly a random act of violence. One of the points that this movie is trying to get across is the inherent evil of the world. See, this movie was adapted and directed by the Coen brothers. The Coen brothers are often cited as being very misanthropic, or in other words, they hate people, and in their movies they get across the point that people are awful. However, if you take the time to pay attention to what their themes are, their movies normally center around the idea of good shining through in an evil world, even if their statement of this is more on the nose sometimes than it is in others.
I don't consider to be even halfway earned. Misanthrope? I don't hate my fellow man, even when he's tiresome and surly and tries to cheat at poker. I figure that's just the human material.
But as mentioned before, with the death of our main character, it seems as if the entire story is unfair. However, when getting across the point that this world is evil, and that evil things are completely objective and happens to the just and unjust, that's kind of the point. This entire movie is full of references to the world being awful, and this idea that we just need to return to the way things used to be. From the plot being propelled by a random shootout that happened between cartel members, the sheriff's continuous stories of horrible people doing horrible things,
Here last week they found this couple out in California. They rent out rooms to old people, kill them, bury them in the yard, cash their Social Security checks.
and even lines like this.
You know, if you'd have told me 20 years ago that I'd see children walking the streets of our Texas towns with green hair, bones in their noses, I just flat out wouldn't have believed you.
Signs and wonders.
It feels like our villain is much more than just a serial killer with a shotgun. The real evil these characters are fighting is the world at large, or the world that they are forced to exist in. Each of our three characters has a different way of confronting this enemy. Llewelyn fights it, Anton becomes it, and the sheriff fears it. A very interesting point that I got when watching this movie is that this idea of characters being driven by their instinct doesn't just stop at our main characters. As a matter of fact, there is this constant theme of greed that continuously pops up with side characters that we meet. Not only is the plot itself propelled by $2 million in a briefcase, but money continues to hold an interesting place in the story in the side plots. For example, whenever Carson is confronted by Anton, he sits there and tries to negotiate for his life with cash.
Make it worth your while. Take you to an ATM. There's 14 grand in it. And everybody just walks away.
An ATM.
Whenever Llewelyn pays a kid for his jacket to get across the Mexican border, the next kid he asks for a beer bottle tries to get more money out of him.
Give me that beer, too.
How much? Brian, give him the beer.
Even at the end of the movie, after Anton gives $100 to a kid for a shirt and to tell the cops that he wasn't there, as Anton walks away, we can hear the kids fighting over who gets to keep the money.
You know part of that's mine, right?
You still got your damn shirt.
And even what it was for.
Well, maybe, but I'm still out of shirt.
The movie follows this entire idea that everyone's drunk on something, and everyone has a goal or motive that they're pushing for. While most of them follow greed, our three characters are the exception. The line I opened this review with, "If the rule you followed had led you to this, of what use is the rule?" is the theme we see reinforced with each of our main trio. Let's look at each of them and the rules they follow, starting with our first, Llewelyn, who follows the rule of man. Llewelyn, for all intents and purposes, is the good guy of the story. Not only is he our protagonist on first glance, but he has all the characteristics of a Saturday morning hero. He's very loving and honorable to his wife.
How do you know he's not on his way to Odessa?
Why would he go to Odessa?
Kill your wife?
Maybe he's the one who needs to be worried.
And exudes a sense of cowboy charisma that makes the audience want to be on his side.
What am I supposed to tell Mama?
Why don't you try standing in the door and hollering, Mom, I'm home.
Llewelyn.
Come on, pack your things.
Not only that, he's smart. And he's smart in the satisfying way that whenever you watch a movie, a character does something and you sit there going, oh yeah, I've I could have done that. Let me write that down in case I'm ever in this specific situation. What's interesting is he begins the story in a very relatable place. Like, if you found $2 million in the middle of the desert next to a dead person, of course you'd take it, especially if no one's around to see you do it. And while this follows the law of greed that applies to most people, as I mentioned a second ago, we immediately see Llewelyn's character turn from selfish into selfless, as he risked his life just to take a dying man a drink of water. What's interesting is this kind of works as a microcosm for what Llewelyn's journey throughout the story would later be. We see Llewelyn do a selfish act and receive little to no repercussion for it. However, whenever he tries to be selfless and do the heroic thing, he's almost killed for it. Whereas when the same thing happens later in the movie, when his motivation switches from money to family, he is killed for it. See, Llewelyn is our quintessential hero because he's the one fighting the world at large. He's fighting back those selfish actions and desires that we see from nearly every other character in the movie. Even up until the end, we see him doing the good guy thing and telling a girl that he can't share a drink with her because he's married.
I got beers in my room.
Oh, I'm waiting on my wife.
However, as always, that righteous act is immediately followed by a demise. And as mentioned before, his death seems entirely pointless. All this build-up for a big showdown between him and Anton, and we don't even get to see him die. If Llewelyn is our symbol of man, and if he is our symbol of someone following the rule of man fighting the world, then his death is a warning sign to those that choose to fight the world. It's harsh, it's uncaring, it's brutal, and to struggle against it is pointless. One could argue that at that point the only way to beat the laws of nature is to join it, which is the exact philosophy we see in our next character, Anton Chigurh, the rule of world. I have seen people legitimately argue the point that Anton Chigurh is an alien, and the reason for it is his complete detachment from the people around him. Not only in the sense that he kills what would be to us innocent people, but in his seeming fascination with the instincts that others follow.
You don't have to do this.
People always say the same thing.
What do they say?
They say, you don't have to do this.
An important distinction to make about Anton is that while he may be a sociopath, he's in no way a crazed killer. Carson even makes reference to this idea.
If I was into cutting deals, why wouldn't I just deal with this guy, Sugar?
Oh, no, you don't understand. You can't make a deal with him. Even if you gave him the money back, he'd still kill you just for inconveniencing him. He's a peculiar man. You might even say he has principles that transcend money or drugs or anything like that. He's not like you. Yeah, he's not even like me.
See, one of the reasons that Anton's so scary is because there's no way to reason with him. There's no bargaining, there's no trick, there's no surefire way out. It's as if he's completely ruthless, yet fair. As we see at the gas station, he flips a coin to decide a man's life. Statistically, there is no fair way to make a decision than that of a coin flip. It's objective, unbiased, and uncaring, much like the nature of Anton himself, much like the world itself. See, as we saw with Llewelyn and with stories we hear throughout, bad things happen to good people. When the world decides who it takes, there's no sentimentality to it and there's no subjective decision making. It's sudden, cruel, and harsh. Or at least that's how most would say it. As Anton would say, it's completely fair. When two people are in an accident and one lives and one doesn't, it's not the universe harboring cruelty for one or the other. It's simply a system of chance, or a coin flip. Anton recognizes that the world itself will not change, and if you can't beat it, then the solution is to join it. This is the reason Anton holds so much disdain for those who seem to follow rules of man.
Well, I got to close now.
You live in that house out back.
Yes, I do.
You lived here all your life?
This was my wife's father's place originally.
You married into it.
It's as if emotion and partial decision making disgust him. He has decided to become an agent of the world he inhabits. However, there is a hypocrisy in the rule of no rules. In deciding to follow the world at large and become a part of the system you inhabit, you are becoming the reality that you once considered inevitable. It's a bizarre sort of self-fulfilling prophecy that by recognizing that the world is cruel and unforgiving, you yourself become cruel and unforgiving. And as mentioned before, The choice to make no choices is a choice in itself. This is even called out by Llewellyn's wife Carla at the end of the movie.
Call it.
No. I ain't gonna call it.
Call it.
The coin don't have no say. It's just you.
And as we see with the car wreck at the end, regardless of what side you're on, if you flip the coin enough times, you'll eventually lose. However, there's something else about Anton. Anton is depicted throughout the movie as being the perfect machine. Not only does he seem to have the right tool for every occasion, but it's as if his brain is hardwired to make him invincible. Like, for example, I didn't notice until like the 9th time watching this movie that whenever he's walking through this one hotel room, checking through all the doors, it's not because he's looking for anyone, it's so whenever he raids the hotel room he's actually looking for in the next scene, he knows where everyone could be hiding. Like I said, he's perfect. A little too perfect. Not only does he walk through the room I mentioned a second ago and kill everyone without a scratch, but scenes such as him blowing up a car in order to steal meds, or walking into a federal building in broad daylight, killing a chief agent in a suit, and then showing up fine in the next scene is completely implausible. Not only is Anton an agent of the world, but he is an embodiment of the world himself. What I'm saying is, Anton isn't real.
Do you see me?
He serves as a stand-in for the world at large. His unstoppable, unbiased nature makes him the physical embodiment of the world itself. He's not evil in the emotional sense. He's not passionate. He is simply a literal force of nature. But you may be asking yourself, how does this make any sense? We see him get into fights with Llewelyn, and we see the actions he commits throughout the story. Why would someone that doesn't actually exist be a main character in this movie? Well, to figure that out, we have to focus on the actual main character of the story. See, Llewelyn's fight ends in the exact same place it started. He's a man trying to survive and protect what matters, and he's killed for it. Anton begins the movie as an adjudicator for the world itself, and he ends the movie the same way. However, there is one character who changes throughout the course of the story, who the story itself does not exist outside the context of, and that character is Sheriff Bell. Not only is the story about him in a metaphorical sense, but it is literally his story in the narrative sense.
I was sheriff of this county when I was 25 years old. Hard to believe.
The movie opens and closes on his narration of events. Even more so, it opens with this line.
The crime you see now, it's hard to even take its measure.
Implying all the events that we're seeing throughout this entire thing is his telling of what's happened. The common theme that we see Sheriff Bell mention time and time again is a new evil that is popping up around him. And on top of that, he continually reminisces about how great the world used to be.
You can't help but compare yourself against the old timers. Can't help but wonder how they'd have operated these times.
Even reminiscing that his father never needed to carry a gun. This theme keeps popping up that he is not fit or capable of taking on this new world.
I feel overmatched.
So think about it from this perspective. If the story we're seeing is from the sheriff's point of view, then what exactly do we know for sure? Well, we know that there was a shootout involving the cartel. We know that the deputy told him that there were bodies found at the hotel. And we know that someone keeps killing people in this small town area. The sheriff himself never sees Anton. Yes, we hear him mentioned by the other sheriff, but once again, the sheriff never sees him, nor is he aware of Anton's presence as he's chasing him, believing that Llewelyn's simply being hunted down by the people he took the money from. So think about this. The sheriff is convinced the world is worse now than it used to be, and it's his job to get the world back. Would it not then be so much easier to imagine that all of this evil, all of this awful stuff you've got to wade through to save the day is just one man? This idea that if you can get the bad guy, everything will be okay. If this entire story is Sheriff Bell's interpretation, then Llewelyn is his Saturday morning hero. He's charismatic, he's suave, he wears the cowboy hat. He's everything we as a people want to see win. What's easier? To imagine that a good guy is being hunted down and killed by the world he inhabits, or that it's just one dude? This scene never made sense to me the first few times I watched this movie. After Llewelyn's killed, the sheriff goes back to the hotel, and whenever he approaches the door, we get this shot of Anton on the other side. It's a very tense moment. It seems like the sheriff's about to break open the door and we're going to get a showdown between our last two characters. However, whenever the sheriff throws open the door, Anton isn't there. The sheriff hopes that he can be the good guy, that he can hunt down all the clues and he can get the bad guy and save the day. But the world just doesn't work like that. We all want there to be a boogeyman on the other side of the door, and all we've got to do is be the hero to swoop in and stop him. But as we come to find out, and as the sheriff found out, the boogeyman isn't there. There is no one enemy, and it's not our job to save the world. See, that's the sheriff's problem. Throughout the movie, we keep seeing these alliterations to the idea that he's got to be the one to save the day.
When Llewelyn calls, just tell him I can make him safe.
He assumes responsibility for the way the world is and thinks it's his job to stop it. The sheriff follows the rule of self. He has a sort of messiah complex for how the world's supposed to be fixed. As he mentions in the movie, he was 25 years old when he became sheriff. He feels like it's his job to make the world how it used to be, and if he doesn't fix it, then it's his fault and he should just throw in the towel. And that's exactly what he does. After the sheriff figures out that there's no monster behind the closet door, he hangs up his hat, and in his desperation, he goes to an old friend who tells him exactly what someone should have told him a long time ago. See, the Messiah complex doesn't only extend to the sheriff, it extends to his belief in God itself.
I always figured when I got older, God would sort of come into my life somehow. And he didn't. And I don't blame him. If I was him, I'd have the same opinion of me that he does.
You don't know what he thinks.
We then get a monologue, which, stepping away from this review for a second, I can definitively say is the only movie scene that I can say changed my life. There have been times myself where I felt the same way the sheriff has, that oh, woe is me and oh, the world's so awful. But exactly as Ellis makes a point here, that ain't the case. Ellis tells the sheriff a story of a man who was shot dead in his home before his wife had to bury him outside all by herself about 80 years ago, long before the age of his dad, long before the good times as he would call it, alluding to the fact that nothing's really changed. And then Ellis says this:
What you got ain't nothing new. This country's hard on people. You can't stop what's coming. It ain't all waiting on you. That's vanity.
That idea, that concept, that's vanity. The feeling that the entire world is falling apart just because it's your fault and just because you aren't trying hard enough. The world has always been a cruel place. There's never been a better days. Ellis is saying that people want to look at the time that they're living in and say that it's the worst and no one else has had a struggle quite like theirs. But as Ellis points out, the struggle, the world, it's always been here. To think it's your job to save the world, and no matter how righteous your intentions are, to call it quits because the world is awful as it always has been, that's vanity. So, what's this all mean? You've got our three characters, and it seems as if all of their interpretations were wrong. The idea of always being the good guy doesn't work. The idea of becoming as evil as the world around you certainly doesn't work and certainly won't save you. And you can't expect to save the world yourself. So, is that it? Is that the solution? Is this entire movie just a roundabout way of saying life sucks? Or is there a way out? Not through righteousness, not through laws, and not through self, but through the things we've always known, even if we've forgotten them. The importance of this final scene cannot be overstated. This is the solution to the entire problem that the movie has been posing. Let's do our best to try to interpret what the sheriff's dreams mean. In his first dream, he says this.
All right, then. Two of them both had my father in them. It's peculiar. I'm older now than he ever was by 20 years. So, in a sense, he's the younger man. Anyway, the first one I don't remember too well, but it was about meeting him in town somewhere. He gave me some money. I think I lost it.
Not only is this allusion to the idea of greed that we've seen brought up throughout the entire film, but it's this idea that his father left him gifts that he's since forgotten or lost. It's as if his dad is telling him that even though he lost the knowledge that he gave him long ago, he's about to tell him again. Which leads us to our second dream.
The second one, it was like we was both back in the older times. And I was a horseback going through the mountains of a night. going through this pass in the mountains. It was cold, and there was snow on the ground. He rode past me and kept on going, never said nothing going by, just rode on past. And he had his blanket wrapped around him and his head down. When he rode past, I seen he was carrying fire in a horn, the way people used to do, and I could see the horn from the light inside of it, about the color of the moon. And in the dream, I knew that he was going on ahead. He's fixing to make a fire somewhere out there in all that dark and all that cold. And I knew that whenever I got there, he'd be there.
We hear this story of a dark world and one man who carried a torch through it, so that when Sheriff Bell got there, that torch would be there, that light in the dark would exist to carry him through this journey. See, this movie was directed by the Coen brothers, but it was adapted from a book written by Cormac McCarthy. Cormac McCarthy is my favorite author, and he has this trick that he does throughout his books where the themes or solutions of one film is picked up with as the meaning behind another. What I mean by that is things mentioned at the end of one story that sort of wrap the bow on the symbolism that has been building up throughout is then used as a narrative or the structure for the next story he tells. It's as if all of his collections are symbolic sequels and prequels of each other. So following that logic, this movie is the predecessor to The Road. The Road, which is my favorite novel of all time, follows the story of a father and son going through a post-apocalypse. The theme of struggle against the world is brought up several times through that story as well. However, every time that the son asks his father if what they're doing is worth it, the father tells the son that we are carrying the fire. What he means by this is that in such a dark and desolate world, there needs to be those who carry the torch now more than ever. Especially in the story The Road, it seems like it'd be a great idea to just give up and call it quits as the sheriff did in No Country for Old Men. But then, who would carry the torch? This is what I mean by the sheriff is the main character of this movie. Not only is he the opening and closing narrator, but he's the one that receives the character arc throughout this movie. It wasn't Llewelyn, it wasn't Anton. It was the sheriff learning that he alone can't save the world. And in these final moments, even if he doesn't recognize it yet, he is given the information of how to really save the world. I mean, come on, the title is about him. No Country for Old Men. This idea that a world used to exist that all these old men used to live in, where everything was better, where everything was okay, is a figment of imagination. There's never been a country for old men. As Ellis told him, this country's hard on people. It always has been. This vain idea that everyone around us is wrong and it's our job to fix things doesn't make sense. Our question, problem, and solution are all presented through him. It's not that we just have to be good enough. It's not that there's just one man we gotta get, and it's not our fault that things are the way they are. There is no paradise that we've lost, and there is no better days that we forgot how to handle. There is no country for old men. However, as time has proven and as the sheriff's dream has proven, there will always be good in the midst of evil. See, the reason we all have this idea that the world used to be better and the sheriff has this idea that things can go back to how they used to be is because of the people we've seen come out of those times. We see these stoic figures of bravery and courage and figure, oh, well, I just guess everyone used to be like that, when as a matter of fact, they came from the same travesties that we do. And the solution they've tried to teach us that we still have trouble figuring out is that good doesn't just exist to change the world, but in spite of it. See, the world is uncaring, brutal, and lawless, as it always has been. But yet that fire has never gone out. The dream also has this characteristic of inevitability, as he watched his dad go on before him, he's going to have to travel the same way. And while it's dark and cold at night, his dad set the fire for him up ahead. The solution to the movie is to be the righteousness, to be the fire that cold nights need. The only way to make things better is to be better. And while you'll never save the world, those who have gone before you have lit the path, so that you can do the same for those that'll come after.
Then I woke up.
That was a lot. Like I talked about at the beginning, this movie, the idea of how well you can put a literal plot with a symbolic plot underneath, and even a solution to not only the movie, but these grand concepts of humanity itself, is one of the biggest things that's inspired me to want to pursue storytelling. Not just to create and inspire others, which is important, but to better understand the human condition itself. Things like this make me realize that that's possible. One of the reasons I'm so thankful to have this platform and to have this channel as successful as it has been is because I hope that with whatever I do, I may be able to get a piece of that across to you all, or at the very least, let you see ways that you can figure it out for yourself. I truly believe one of the greatest characteristics of human nature is the stories we tell and what we do with them. And I can definitively say it has been this story that has inspired me and hopefully others. But regardless, if you think all that's dumb, if you don't care about the final solution, blah, 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 whatever, I sincerely mean it. Thank you for watching. Like I said, this is one of the videos that made me want to start this channel. I've had this idea in my head for years, and I always thought if I can just get a medium to get this across to people, I'm gonna do it. So sorry if this video took a little while to come out, but as you can understand from what I'm saying, I wanted it to work out. So as always, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you so much to everyone for being a part of this, and thank you for 100,000 subscribers. Like I said at the beginning, I can't comprehend, and this is bigger than I ever thought it could be. It was after I hit 100,000 that I decided that I need to go ahead and do this, or else I'll just keep putting it off. So thank you for still being here, and thank you for listening. There's going to be an actual thank you for 100,000 video that's going to come out soon, as well as a really big iceberg that I'm really excited about and hopefully you'll enjoy. But right now I want to say thank you to all of my subscribers. You all mean the most. Thank you to my patrons. I couldn't do without you guys, and a very special thank you to my top tier patrons. Thank you, Caleb, Hef, Eddie, Benjamin, Tim, Publius, Saucy, Neoclassical, Succubus, Steven, Marcy, Kevin, Cody, Ranger, Xavier, Alvaro, Damon, Alex, Florum, Firestar, Joseph, Dred Zeppelin, Gus Norco, Gus Coombe, your boy the real Cody, J-Bobs, Kenny, Jakey, Bryson, Kingler, Casually, Duckman, Worm85, Data Cosmic, Trusty Patchy, Mr. Ando, Keegan, Peachy D, Puff, Diego, Anna Tobin, White Rabbit, Donnie Ego, Richard, Marigold Soul, Furby, Max McClellan, Bailey Bartlett, Emmanuel Conejo, Cinderlight, Neem, Ollie 2, Cameron, Lincoln, Nicholas, Jeremy, Ty Guy, Nua Flit, Lily, Walkie Cody, Sinixari, Box, Margaret, Dennis, Andy, Daniel, Reptile Express, Expuvi, Scout with the Name, John Doe, Sarah, Ralph, Zach, Hal Thisif, Dimitri, Anthony, The Gray Man, Samuel, Christine, Will, The Sandwich, Sunny, Tritz43, Nessie, Kid V Cat, Honey, and Bradley. Thank you all so much. It means the most. At some point, probably sooner than later, honestly, I'm going to have to just start scrolling the names because this is going to be like a 5-minute read. But thank you all so much. I couldn't do it without you guys, and it really does mean the most. So as mentioned at the beginning of the video, the new editor's social links will be in the description if you want to talk to her or harass her or whatever. Patreon, sweatshirt, and Twitter of mine will also be linked in the description, as well as the Black Parade video that I mentioned at the beginning. And new videos will be out soon, hopefully sooner than this one came out. But thank you all for bearing with me. Thank you all for waiting. And as always, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!